Hello, welcome to the lecturer's desk. Get your medical thoughts cleared before you leave. And please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell.
Hello guys, welcome back to the lecturer's desk once again. Today we are going to talk about junctional rhythm. Now, when we talk of junctional rhythm, what is it? It's a condition in which the normal rhythm of the heart or normal electrical activity is being generated from the AV node. We all know that the normal pacemaker of the heart is the SA node, but in certain conditions, the SA node may fail to supply the electrical impulse throughout the entire heart, and because of that, the heart must adapt to the new generation of a pacemaker, and this pacemaker is going to give us the generation of the electrical impulse that will be transmitted throughout the heart, so that the heart can continue working. And here we adapt to the AV node, giving us the electrical impulse. So now the AV node will be serving as our natural pacemaker rather than the SA node. Now, we all know that the AV node, the fibers over there, they are not the same as the fibers over the SA node. And because of that, the electrical impulse generated over there, the velocity of it, the speed of it, or the at rate in which it transmits throughout the heart is going to be low than the SA node. Now, let's get into it. Now, we have our junctional rhythm. Now, junctional rhythm, what are you going to check, or how are you going to identify it in the EKG graph? Now, first thing that you must talk about is the heart rate. You must know the heart rate of a junctional rhythm, and also you must know the normal rhythm of a junctional rhythm, and also the P wave. How are you going to identify the P wave over there? If you see a P wave, you'll be able to know that yes, this is a junctional rhythm. This is not a junctional rhythm. Now we talk of our PR interval, and lastly we talk of our QRS complex. Now, when we talk of a junctional rhythm, as I said, it's a condition in which the heart electrical impulse is being generated at the AV node. That is the barrier between the atria and then the ventricles. Now, the atria and then the ventricles, let's assume it starts from here. We can divide it into three main sections or three main portions. We have the first part of the AV node, the middle part of the AV node, and also the last part of the AV node. Now, when we generate electrical impulse over here, it can be at the first part of the AV node, or can be at the middle part of the AV node, or can be at the last part of the AV node. But before that, what is the normal heart rate generated by the AV node? The normal heart rate generated by the AV node is 40 to 60 rhythm per 1 minute. So because of that, we say the normal heart rate of the junctional rhythm is in the form of a bradycardia. But it's not always, but it is generally in the form of a bradycardia. We can get it in the form of a tachycardia, but not as frequent as we get the low frequency of the junctional rhythm. Now, let's get back to what I was explaining. Now, this being our AV node, the AV node having three portions. The first portion, which is closer to the atria, the middle portion, and then the last portion, which is also closer to the ventricles. Do you understand? So now, let's look at something over here. You see, when you generate electrical impulse, the electrical impulse generated must transmit throughout the entire heart. So imagine if we generated the electrical impulse at the SA node. The SA node must transmit it throughout the entire heart. The same thing applies to the generation of electrical impulse at the what AV node. So when you generate it at the AV node also must transmit it throughout the entire heart. So some must come upwards and some must go what downwards. So some must what depolarize the atria and some must also depolarize what the ventricles. Are we clear with it? Now let's look at something over here. When you generate the electrical impulse at the first part or the first portion of the AV node, and then the movement of the vector depolarizing the atria, and then the movement of the vector depolarizing the ventricle, the atria is going to be depolarized first before the ventricle. Are we clear with it? And when the atria depolarize first before the ventricle, you get what? A P wave. You get a P wave before generating what? A QRS complex. Are we clear with it? Now this P wave, what is it? Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative? Is it going to be biphasic? Now look at something over here. The P wave generated over here. Look at the vector. The vector will be moving what? Upwards. And we know the base of the heart at the right side is what? A negative electrode. You place a negative electrode over here. Are we clear with it? A negative electrode, and here is what? A positive. And from our previous video, I said when a positive vector moves towards a negative electrode, it gives what? A negative reading. So here the P wave generating over here, or the atrial contraction over here, is being represented by what? A P negative what? Reading. So here we get what? A P wave. We get P wave being what? Negative. So P wave negative. P wave negative. Are we clear with it? On the D1. Sorry, on the D2. So P wave negative on the D2. Normally, D2 must give what? A positive reading. So we getting what? A negative reading at the P wave. It must tell us that yes, there's something wrong somewhere. It is not in the normal generation of what electrical impulse in the heart. So we must check it well and also take other criteria into consideration. Now, let's look at something over here too. Now we have what? Our P wave over here. This P wave is giving us what? A negative reading. And this P wave is also before QR complex, because the atria contracts before the ventricle. And we know the P wave represents the atrial contraction, and then the QRS complex represents the ventricular contraction. So you get what? You get what? A P wave forming first before the QRS complex. Now let's look at our graph over here. We look at our graph. This is what? Our P wave before the QRS complex. So with that, we have this. You see, can you see? We have what? A negative reading over here. This is our P wave. P QRS complex. T P QRS complex T. Now, this is giving us a negative reading. It's giving us a negative reading. So it must tell us that we have what? A junctional rhythm. And this junctional rhythm, the electrical activity, it was generated at the upper part of the AV node. Do you understand? Or the first portion of the AV node. Are we clear with it? So with that, we get what? A negative reading of the P. And we get a negative reading of the P. The P is also what? Before the QRS complex. Are we clear with it? Now, let's look at something over here. In a condition in which we generate the electrical impulse at the middle part. So this is dividing the atria and the ventricle equally. You understand? Dividing the atria and the ventricle equally. So when you generate electrical impulse over here, the vector moving upwards to depolarize the atria, and then the vector moving downwards to depolarize the ventricle, they are going to reach at the same rate. So they are going to depolarize at the same rate. But look at something over here. The atria depolarization, and the ventricle depolarization, they are not the same. You see, the ventricles, they undergo what? The contraction and the pumping of the heart, and because of that, it is having what? A high, or it has a thick myocardium. Do you understand? It has a thick myocardium. So because of that, when the P generates its electrical impulse, or when the P depolarizes the atria, and also the ventricle, the QRS complex also depolarize the ventricle wave, because it is very high than the P. Do you understand? The ventricular wave, because it is very high than the P, it is going to what? Hide the P wave from what? Expressing its what? Electrical activity. And because of that, we won't be what? Seeing what? A P wave. We won't be seeing what? A P wave. A P wave will be what? Hiding inside what? The QRS complex. Are we clear with it? Now, let's look at our second graph. This is our second graph. If you check our second graph, we have QRS complex T. QRS complex T. The same thing. If you come here, we have QRS complex T. QRS complex T. We don't have what? A P wave. So the P wave is what? It is hiding inside what? The QRS complex. Do you understand? That means the electrical impulse was generated at the middle of what? The AV node. Are we clear with it? So we see the P wave is what? Hiding, or we won't see. There will be what? Absence of what? The P wave. Are we clear with it? So before the QRS complex, the P wave is going to be what? Negative. Are we clear with it? So the P wave is what? Negative. Now, inside the QRS complex, the P wave is what? Absence. Are you clear with it? So we won't see what? The P wave. So we say no P wave. No P wave. Now let's come to the what? The next one. We have a condition in which the electrical impulse generated will be what? Forming at the latter part of what? Of the AV node. And when it forms at the latter part of the AV node, it will take a long time before it reaches what? The atria. So that the atria what? Contracts. And then it will take a shorter time to what? To depolarize the ventricle. So because of that, the ventricular contraction is what? Will be happening first before the atrial contraction. So for that one, the P wave will be what? Happening after the QRS complex. So if you take the graph, you see a QRS complex first before a P. Do you understand? Before we see what? The P wave. That must tell you that the P wave generated was at what? At the latter part of the AV node. Are we clear with it? Now, let's look at something here. So this is what? Our QRX. So after what? Our QRS complex, that is what? The ventricular contraction. We got what? A negative wave over here. And this negative wave over here is what we call what? The P wave. So the P wave happened after the QRS complex. So we get what? P wave negative after the QRS complex. So in atrial contraction or in junctional rhythm, in a junctional rhythm can get three forms of P wave. P wave before QRS complex, which is negative, absence of P wave, and then P wave after the QRS complex, which is also what? A negative wave. Are we clear with it? So now, so here the P wave can be what? Can be what? Present. Can be negative before the QRS complex. It can be absent, and it can be what? Also what? Negative after the QRS complex. Now, let's look at the interval. Let's look at the interval PR. The interval PR. How are we going to what? Identify the interval PR. The interval PR2 can be short. It can be short. Or you won't see. It can be absent. Or it can be retrograde. Can be retrograde. Now, how are you going to explain this thing? It can be short in such a way that you see the PR interval is the time taken for what? The electrical impulse to move from the atria into the ventricle. And here in the case that the electrical impulse generated was already at the what? The AV node. So it will take a very short time to reach the ventricles. So you see it what? As a very short what? PR what? Interval. Now let's get something over here. So the PR interval is very, very short. So we look at the PR interval over here. We have 1, 2 boxes. We have 2 boxes for the PR interval, which is very short. Now, in a certain condition, you will see the PR interval. That is the absence of what? The PR interval. That is where the P wave will be what? Hiding inside the QRS complex. So you won't see what? The PR interval. Okay. Now, and then the lastly, the retrograde is where the P wave is being generated after the QRS complex. So now it will be what? It will be what? Opposite of what? The PR. Do you understand? That's why we say it's what? A retrograde. So here, when you take what? The PR, this is our R and this is our P. So now it will be what? A PR again. It will be what? A RP. That is the reason why I'm saying what? It is what? A retrograde. So the PR interval can be short. It can be what? You cannot see. Or it can be what? Retrograde. Are you clear with it? That is where the normal PR will change to what? RP interval. Are you clear with it? Now, let's come to the QRS complex. The QRS complex will be what? Normal. For that one, it will be what? Affected. And then the lastly, the rhythm of the junctional what? Rhythm. So the rhythm of it will be also what? Normal. Or I must say it will be what? Regular. As you can see over here, distance between here and here is the same as the distance between here and here and the same as this. This is what you call what? It is what? Regular. When you check this part, this and that, they are what? The same. It is what? Regular. You check this, they are also what? The same. It is what? Regular. So these are the information you will need to identify what? A junctional rhythm in what? In the EKG graph. First, you must know the what? The heart rate. The heart rate must be between what? 40 to 60, because that is what the rate generated at the AV node. Second, the rhythm must be what? Regular. Must have a regular rhythm. Third, the P wave must be negative, or you cannot see, and also the P wave must be also after the QRS complex. Now, the PR interval will also be what? Short, or some conditions you see it at retrograde, or some conditions you won't see it at all. So this must tell you where the electrical impulse was generated. Was it at the early part of the AV node, at the middle part of the AV node, or at the end of the AV node, giving us that information. So this brings us to the end of today's topic, which talks about junctional rhythm. That is the electrical impulse generated at the AV node and then transmit throughout the entire heart, so that the heart can undergo contraction. Do you understand? So if you find the class useful, please like, share, and then subscribe to the channel, and give us the motivation you will need to continue providing you vivid informations or important informations or important lectures about medicine.